I'm on the fence.
Like, you want free college, but like, how are you actually going to get there?
Making the country better. I think that's what we need. We need someone in office just like that. I think she has what it takes.
If you look at his history, I think he's very strong on health care reform.
But I'd be shocked if they came up with somebody that I'd be comfortable with.
I've seen her be the fighter that I know she can be, and I still personally really like her.
The republic is at stake.
You're watching NBC 10 Decision 2020 Super Showdown.
It's just after 8 o'clock on this Super Tuesday. Good evening and welcome to NBC10's extended coverage of the biggest night in politics so far, this presidential campaign. I'm NBC10.com's Brian McCrone.
And I'm NBC10 political reporter Lauren Mayk. Over the next 30 minutes, we will look at races across the country and talk about how tonight's results will shape the presidential campaign as we look ahead to the primaries happening in our area in Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey. Now, several candidates dropped out of the race over the past few days. Just to recap, the Democratic candidates still in are Bernie Sanders of Vermont, former Vice President Joe Biden, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and Representative Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. And Republicans also casting votes on this Super Tuesday, but all but one state holding their GOP primaries. President Donald Trump does not face a serious challenge from candidates within his party, so he is expected to get the GOP nomination.
Here's a refresher on who's voting today. 14 states headed to the polls for primary voting, with diverse and populous states like California, Texas, Virginia, and North Carolina among the group. On the Democratic side, 1,344 delegates are up for grabs this Super Tuesday, and in each state, candidates must earn at least 15% of the total votes to claim any delegates. And here's the delegate breakdown for the Democrats as we head into today. A candidate needs 1,991 delegates to clinch the nomination. You have Sanders in the lead right now with 60 delegates, Biden with 53. Pete Buttigieg, who is no longer in the race, earned 26 delegates. Warren with 8, and Amy Klobuchar, who also dropped out, has 7.
And we have a projection from NBC News. Bernie Sanders is the projected winner in Vermont. That is, of course, his home state. And former Vice President Joe Biden is the projected winner in North Carolina. That is an NBC News projection. And NBC News projects former Vice President Joe Biden the winner in Virginia. Exit polling showed 66% of Black Virginians cast their vote for the former vice president. And this just in, NBC News is projecting Joe Biden as the winner of the Alabama primary. And since we began our show, several additional states closed voting. They are Maine and Massachusetts on the East Coast, plus Texas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Minnesota. We will be updating you with results, exit polling, and projected winners as they come in. So one of the big questions tonight, how will Mike Bloomberg do? Tonight is really his first big test. The billionaire came into the race late and used his fortune to put himself on the map. But can his strategy pull off a big win here in Pennsylvania? We spoke with campaign leaders.
In Media, Delaware County, Mike Bloomberg sending a bus, opening an office.
Thank you for your hard work.
And trying to lay the groundwork to win the Democratic nomination and the White House.
We're taking it to Donald Trump's front door already. We're in 45 states. We have 2,100 people on the ground.
Tim O'Brien is a senior advisor for the Bloomberg campaign, which gets its first big test with voters today.
Our expectations for Super Tuesday, we are very optimistic. I've been in most of the Super Tuesday states. We have big field operations in all of those states.
The former mayor of New York has not been on the ballot as a presidential candidate yet. Super Tuesday states are the first. He's introduced himself to the country with ads like this one and 2 turns on the debate stage. After his first debate, his campaign acknowledging he had to do better.
Mike is a gifted public servant. I don't think he was ready for the circular firing squad that the first debate was.
The billionaire businessman served 3 terms as New York's mayor and has been a Democrat, a Republican, and an independent. His record in New York includes support for the stop and frisk policing policy that he has since apologized for, saying it, quote, got out of control.
If I go back and look at my time in office, the one thing that I'm really worried about, embarrassed about, was how it turned out with stop and frisk.
Since leaving office, Bloomberg has spent millions on gun violence prevention efforts. In 2016, his Independence USA PAC endorsed Pennsylvania's Republican Senator Pat Toomey, who has pushed to expand background checks for gun purchases. Toomey won that election, and I caught up with him recently in Reading.
I know he supported you in your last Senate race. What do you think of his candidacy, and is there any chance that he would get support from you?
I think Mike, first of all, I'm grateful for his support. I appreciate that. And I think he was very clear about the reason that he supported my candidacy is because of my support for background checks on gun purchases. That's something that he supports as well. I think he was a very successful mayor in New York. He's a very competent guy.
Toomey says he will be supporting President Trump. As for the race for the Democratic nomination,
I think the energy on the Democratic side seems to be very radicalized. It's, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren advocating socialism and socialist policies. So I don't know what the prospects are for Mayor Bloomberg.
While Bloomberg is right now competing for delegates in the nomination race, his campaign says he is also building for a general election against President Trump, with a more than 60-person organizing team in Pennsylvania, and plans to follow up the offices in the Philly area and Pittsburgh office with ones in Scranton, Harrisburg, Erie, Allentown, and Westmoreland County. By then, Pennsylvania voters will have the results of Bloomberg's first test on Super Tuesday.
If you're looking for a guide to Super Tuesday, we've got you covered at NBC10.com. We explain how the delegates are divvied up, what's at stake, and more. Plus, you'll find live updating results throughout tonight as they come in from across the country, and get analysis from NBC News. We also have a special section dedicated to Decision 2020, where you'll find stories, polling, video, and analysis for local issues as well as the nationwide contests. You'll find it all right now at NBC10.com and your NBC10 app.
Pennsylvania is a battleground state, and soon the candidates will be crisscrossing the Keystone State. So what will they find when they get here? Well, different opinions and different issues important to voters in different parts of the state. I talked with some of the voters they'll have to convince.
On the campaign trail, handshakes, photos, and a chance for voters to tell the people running for president what's on their mind. When candidates get to our region, they'll find new challenges and potentially lots of new voters. The Philly region, including South Jersey and Delaware, is home to at least a dozen colleges and universities, translating into thousands of students who will bring their own point of view to the polls.
I think that environmental awareness is probably my biggest issue.
I've been liking Bernie for a while.
I feel like there's a lot of poverty going on, and that's resulting in crimes.
Nationwide, 28% of young voters turned out in the 2018 midterm, according to research from Tufts University, doubling the 2014 midterm estimate. To get Maria Ribeiro's vote, she's looking for specifics.
I'm honestly just so exhausted of politicians kind of just saying things that they actually don't mean, just to get certain people to love them and to support them in the wrong ways. And it's cool, you're pro marijuana, but how are you going to treat my immigrant family? You want free college, but how are you actually going to get there?
Candidates will find another challenge in the size of Pennsylvania and what residents in different parts care about.
You can't say the opposite in different parts of the state, but Democrats in different parts of the state have different values.
One example J.J. Balaban from political media firm The Wynn Company gives, the idea of banning fracking, a way of extracting natural gas.
That's a reasonably popular position to Democrats in southeastern Pennsylvania. That's not a very popular position in southwestern Pennsylvania around Pittsburgh. Why? Because that's where there are thousands of people that are employed because of the fracking industry.
In the eastern part of Pennsylvania where we are, progressive politicians have been gaining power in Philadelphia. A Working Families Party candidate earning a seat on the city council, the mayor and DA endorsing Elizabeth Warren, the 2019 election's highest vote getter on council endorsing Bernie Sanders. The Philly region is also home to labor unions who represent workers and invited candidates to pitch their ideas to members last year. I sat down with Philadelphia Council AFL-CIO President Pat Eiding.
Are there things that they haven't addressed yet that your members are saying they'd like some answers for?
Infrastructure. I don't think there's any, no matter what industry the unions are in, everybody knows by now that, a real infrastructure program that every president has talked about and done nothing about would solve the problems of the world.
But Eiding also warns views among workers on issues and the president vary around the state.
You got the pockets of folks, especially in the steel mill areas, the miner areas, where this guy's still got them believing they're going to have some new stuff open up.
Now let's welcome our guests to discuss how Super Tuesday will shake out for the presidential hopefuls. Eleanor Dezzi is Democratic consultant with the Dezzi Group, and Joe Watkins is a GOP analyst and MSNBC contributor. Thanks so much for sticking around tonight. Let's stick on Pennsylvania to start out here. And Joe, President Trump has a bit of advantage against any of these Democratic candidates because he has run statewide in Pennsylvania before.
That's exactly right. And he's really helped by division. So the more there's a division, a deep division between the Democratic candidates, that really helps him. So the infighting between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, the willingness of some Democrats to say that they would not support the Democratic nominee if it wasn't their person, that helps President Trump. That gives him an even added advantage over what he already has.
But we do have a favorite son in Joe Biden. He was born in Scranton, and he's very, very popular up in Northeast Pennsylvania. And he sometimes was known, when he was in the Senate, as the third senator from Pennsylvania. He has picked up the endorsement of a lot of the elected officials here. Now, they're not all with Biden. Some council people have gone. Actually, today I found out that Marsquilla in City Council went with Bloomberg.
Like Bloomberg,
You know, Helen Gim has gone with Sanders. So it's not monolithic here.
The mayor and district attorney in Philadelphia have gone with Elizabeth Warren.
That's right.
Elizabeth Warren, right. But, you know, Senator Casey, who is the senior senator from Pennsylvania, has gone with Biden and has been with him since the beginning. So, you know, and you have several of the members of the congressional delegation. So it's going to, the advantage that Joe has when he comes to Pennsylvania is he knows the issues here. He knows them very well. I think we were talking about, you know, the one issue in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania is poverty. And the one issue that is really being targeted in Pennsylvania, because we have the race of the Pennsylvania House, the whole Pennsylvania House, and half of the Senate, is the minimum wage. Governor Wolf has really been pushing to up that minimum wage. The House and the Senate have stalled it in Harrisburg. And that's why these special elections, there's one on March 17th in Bucks County, and the Pennsylvania House and Senate, the Democrats here are trying strong to take that House and Senate over, because that's going to be the #1 issue in Pennsylvania. Poverty and minimum wage.
Something these Democratic candidates will probably want to talk about when they come here.
Absolutely.
And how do they how does a more progressive candidate like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren navigate the differences in demographics across the state, though, too?
Well, you know, Bernie has some people here. And, you know, if you look at the gentrification in Philadelphia, it's a lot of young people who are really looking to Bernie for some help with, you know, taxes and student loans and things like that. So he has some base here. There's no doubt about it. I just don't know if it's going to resonate with the rest of Philadelphia and the suburbs. The suburbs are not really looking too good for Bernie. You know, Montgomery and Delaware County, they've gone Democratic this time, but they haven't gone progressive. They're more midstream.
With the results that we are seeing so far tonight, we've seen Joe Biden pick up a couple states, which is, I mean, this is in some ways the best night that he has had.
Yeah, of course.
So far. What are you going to be looking for inside those numbers?
Well, I think I still want to wait till Texas and California report. Those are the two biggest states. We're talking about over 600
delegates
between those two states. And remember, California started voting before Joe Biden won that decisive win in South Carolina. So
before the
endorsements
out.
and the withdrawals from the race. And so those are going to be two very important results for us to see. But things look good for him. You consider what happened in Alabama. You consider the strength of his win in Virginia, given the fact that Bloomberg had more offices than anybody and dropped a lot of money in Virginia, but didn't get the return on investment that he thought he would get. Those are good signs for Joe Biden.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we talk a lot about momentum, but really it's all about the numbers.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. All right, we're getting in new exit polls tonight, giving us some insight into what's motivating voters. But how do they work and why are they so important? Well, Chase Kane from NBCLX breaks it down, and we'll get to those poll results on the other side of this.
An important win for Vice President Al Gore. NBC News projects that he wins the 25 electoral votes in the state of Florida. What the networks give us, the networks taketh away. NBC News is now taking Florida out of Vice President Gore's column.
Most college students today won't remember that, the 2000 election. But it was embarrassing for most major news organizations. And it happened because of exit polls. They look like this, but what are exit polls? Why are exit polls important? Well, there are two big reasons.
General Eisenhower, and the new popular vote reporting now 45% of the popular vote is in.
So this is the first important thing, election nights, which make exit polls famous, or infamous, as they did in 2004 when early reports suggested America would have a President John Kerry.
And sure, it is important to know who won, but it's also important to know who voted, who you are. And that's the reason I'm here in Manchester, New Hampshire on primary day.
And I understood the idea of an exit poll, but I'd never seen one in action, so I went to find some in New Hampshire's biggest city. The process is really simple. A voter walks out of their polling place, a person with a clipboard asks maybe every other voter, every fifth voter, something like, "Hey, would you take a quick survey?" The voter fills out a short form, and to keep it anonymous, the paper goes in a box, much like an actual ballot.
Never taken an exit poll before?
No, never taken one before.
What was it like?
It's a few questions, didn't take much time.
It was quick, it was easy, just got to be honest in kind of my thoughts on what I'm looking for politically.
She's referencing the other thing about exit polling that's so important, the why. On election nights, we want to know who won ASAP, but it's why they won that's even more enlightening. In 2016, President Trump shocked a lot of people with his win, but why did he win? One specific question from nationwide exit polling might hold the answer. When voters were asked what quality is most important in their candidate, the top answer was a candidate who, quote, can bring needed change. Roughly 4 in 10 people gave that answer, and among that segment, 83% of them voted for Donald Trump.
This is the room where we not only analyze the exit poll data on election nights, but kind of where we're standing here. We have a bunch of survey researchers and statisticians who are looking at all of our different models and projecting the races that night.
There's obviously a lot of scrutiny on elections and what you do, what NBC News does in calling races. How has your job changed since even 2016?
Yeah, so after 2016, the exit poll specifically, we put in some, we did some fixes, we did some investigation to think about how we could make the instrument better. We now will go to early voting locations in person ahead of election day, and we're conducting exit polls that way so that we get a better sense of everybody, the early voters and then actual election day voters.
It just seems like there's a lot more scrutiny, there's a lot more questions around American elections. I mean, maybe more than ever, is that fair to say?
I think it probably is fair to say, yeah. I mean, there has been a push to kind of talk about the polls and focus on them a little bit more. And the value to an exit poll is this is the only poll in the country where we know for a fact that we are getting voters. And that really is the value of this tool. We will never make a projection in this room unless these guys are 99.5% confident in that outcome.
That's in part to prevent another oops scenario like in 2000 with Bush Gore. And since the 2020 election may get more attention than any other election in our nation's history, what will exit polls be able to tell us this year?
I think a big part of what we want to look for this year is enthusiasm. How impactful do people want to be? How important is it to go out to vote? As we're looking through the Democratic primaries this year, we want to know how engaged are people, especially young people. Why are you turning out? What motivates you to be there? And I think it's going to continue to be an important conversation in November when we get to the general election.
So let's look at some exit polls right now. Voters are split on whether the country should return to Obama-era policies or head in a more liberal direction. Exit polling from 12 of the 14 Super Tuesday states found 44% of voters say they would like to return to Obama-era policies. 38% say they want more liberal policies, while 11% want more conservative policies. And let's talk about issues. Healthcare is the most important issue for Democrats voting on Super Tuesday. NBC News exit polling from 12 of the 14 states shows climate change came in second and income inequality was the third most important issue followed by race relations. And let's talk a little bit about some of these polls, particularly the one about whether or not Democrats want to return to Obama-era policies or go more liberal. What I would like to know is it sort of depends on what states you're talking about,
Sure,
too.
sure, absolutely.
Whether it's in the states that ultimately matter for them.
Yeah. Pennsylvania, I think, is staying true. You know, they want to stay with the Obama era. And then the other thing is the Affordable Care Act, you know, which is the Obama care. People are really concerned that the Supreme Court has said they're going to hear that case this year. And that has made people very nervous because they don't know where the Supreme Court will go with this. We really don't know because you never know where they're going to vote. And here's the issue. Will they just decimate it, or, you know, do we go back to Obamacare? And then, you know, I mean, Bernie wants to, do free Medicare for all. People are very confused about this and very upset.
And the Supreme Court's going to be looking at it this year, but they won't actually be making a decision until next year, until after the election. So what does that mean for sort of how health care is going to be part of the discussion?
Well, I think it's part of the discussion, but in terms of anything concrete getting done, I mean, I think the sense becomes that there's probably not a lot that's going to happen anytime soon. And the split in the way that Democrats see things, that is those that want more conservative policies, those that want Obama-era policies, those that want more liberal policies, really is to the benefit of President Trump and to the disadvantage of Democrats, because within those numbers, there is some percentage of Democrats who say that I don't care who the nominee is. If it's not my person who's headed in the direction I want to go, I'm not voting for the nominee. And that's a problem for Democrats.
We saw that. I mean, we saw that in some exit results that we ran on our broadcast special tonight. That there was a percentage of Democrats in those exit polls who said that they, I think it was 1 in 7, 1 in 7 who said that they would not commit to voting for the nominee. We don't know how they would ultimately vote.
There actually was a very conservative legislator in Virginia who was interviewed today, and he said that he was absolutely not voting for the top of the ticket if it was Sanders and Trump. I mean, this is a Republican legislator. I mean, that was a stunning admission that he would say something like that. So I'm not so sure it's 1 in 7. I think it may be even a little more, and it's very disconcerting for the Democratic Party.
Speaking of someone who's become an outsider, though, and you look at those exit numbers, and yes, a lot of people want to return to the Obama era policies, but then there's also that liberal contingent. It's almost 4 out of 10 now. Why has, say, a candidate like Elizabeth Warren struggled so far?
Yeah, she really, it's a shame. I think she is a very smart woman. I think she's got some great policies and what have you. She has not been able to raise the money to articulate her policies and get the message out. She also angered some people in the Democratic Party. The one thing there was during the debates was an agreement not to get personal and attacking each other on the stage. And they all seemed to try and keep it pretty good in that respect. But she really went after Bloomberg. Not that everybody liked Bloomberg. That wasn't it. It was that she made it too personal. And so, I mean, she really has not been able to garner delegates. And from what I understand, her money is really drying up rapidly.
I don't see any path
How much longer can she stay in?
She said she's staying in until the convention, but I think
that's going to be hard.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard.
Absolutely. I think they're going to sit down and talk to her, not only money-wise, but I think, they're going to say to her for the good of the party, So, and if she wants to be a cabinet member, if, the Democrats win, or a running mate, she has to work with them. Well, and, it really does. You really do have to work with the leadership.
Well, you've seen the 3 early states go, and Bloomberg's name is not at the top of any of those lists. What is his long game here? And he's spending already $500 million. Well, he's got more to go.
He has an almost inexhaustible amount of money to spend.
Yes.
And so the fact that he may not be registering big numbers early on does not daunt him. It doesn't mean he's going to get out.
Right.
He has nothing to lose by staying in. He has everything to gain if the convention is brokered. If he can siphon off enough votes from the 2 top candidates to keep either one of them from getting the required number to be the outright nominee, that's a good opportunity for him.
He was really hoping that when Buttigieg and Klobuchar got out, that he would be able to go and somehow get their delegates. But as I mentioned earlier, They did not get out of the race entirely. They suspended their campaign. So the delegates that they have are still committed to them at this point, and will be until the convention. So he's not going to be able to get those. So like Joe said, the only hope he has is a broker convention.
Who can have the actual conversation with him about where he goes and really assess that? I mean, who can have that conversation? Does he have advisors he can have that conversation?
He has advisors that he pays, and he's paying them to help him. He has staff people, exactly. They're paid to help him get to where he wants to go. I don't think there's anybody that can tell him it's time for you to step aside for the good of the party.
He writes the check. He does, he's not spending, all the other candidates are on the phone, raising money, listening to the people that give them the money and saying, listen, I have an idea, could you put this in your platform and what have you? And they do listen to so those people become their advisors. Like Joe said, he doesn't have any advisors. It's all paid staff. He's in charge.
Do you think it's been harder than he thought it would be?
I think he wasn't prepared for the debate. I mean, had he done better in the debate, he might be registering some better numbers. But Elizabeth Warren just took him apart in the debate. And I was surprised, frankly, that somebody of his caliber wouldn't have been prepared for those obvious questions about his past.
You have to wonder if his staff didn't try, but like we just said, I think he thinks he's above all of this, that he's not listening.
And what we don't know are, as we said, what's sort of inside some of these numbers. We know who the projected winner is in a number of these states now, but it's all about getting those delegates. Like Mike Bloomberg's team had said from the outset that their goal was not necessarily to win states, it was to accumulate delegates. So we don't know where he's reached that 15% threshold yet, both statewide and also in these congressional districts. It's a very complicated system, but we don't know how many delegates he may accumulate tonight.
That's exactly right.
All right. So, and we have to look at California and Texas for Bloomberg. I mean, that's if he gets delegates, that's where it's going to be.
All right, we'll be watching that. Eleanor, Dezzi, and Joe Watkins, thank you so much for being here.
It was great.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
We're just a few weeks away from primary day in Pennsylvania and Delaware. That's coming up on April 28th. Then on June 2nd, New Jersey voters will head to the polls for their primary. And don't forget that you can get instant updates all night long on the voting tallies across the country on NBC10.com and your NBC10 app. Just look for the Decision 2020 section. We'll be updating that section throughout the entire election season as well. That does it for our streaming coverage of Super Tuesday. Remember to download the NBC10 app for breaking news updates.
And thanks again to Eleanor and Joe for your discussion tonight, and for all of you for joining us. We'll have more live Super Tuesday coverage on NBC10 News at 11 p.m. Have a great night, everyone.